and that would be spring camp storylines. I asked all of you guys to kind of come up with something to talk about, and Honke, since you are our guest tonight, you and Rob kind of came up with wide receivers and running backs. Is there anything specific about that position? Is there a dark horse, somebody that you've heard about in camp that has kind of got a little bit of buzz? What do you think?
Yeah, I think for both of those positions, what was attractive to Rob and I to talk about it was just the fact that there's so much change at those spots right now, and that's from the coaching down to the players and new transfers coming in and everything. Those are two areas that there's a lot of talent there, but it just looks different, and that starts with the coaches. I mean, obviously, Ryan Held and I guess Lubick, that those were the coaches from a year ago. They're both gone, replaced with Brian Applewhite from TCU and then Mickey Joseph. I mean, it feels like we hit it out of the park with both of these hires, and it's guys that are real pros and experts at what they're coaching. And again, I hate saying it about them that way because then it implies that the guys before weren't pros. I don't ever intend it like that, but I'm just saying these guys are pros at coaching those very specific spots. Mickey Joseph has two of the top 3 or 4 receivers right now in the pros with Chase and Jefferson. And, and these are guys that highly accomplished guys. And then also you throw in the recruiting element of it. It's just that these guys can step in on day one. And I was a little bit concerned, like, let's start with receiver. I was a little concerned that maybe some guys, Xavier Betts or somebody might transfer at the end of last year, right? And then you bring in Mickey Joseph, and the second that he gets in there, I'm like, oh my gosh, we've got a coach here that guys would kill to play for, and any of those concerns went away. It's like he's not only is Joseph gonna calm the storm in those rooms, but he's also going to go out and start bringing in his own guys, and then DeColdis Crawford, and obviously bringing Palmer in the transfer from LSU. I mean, immediately you start seeing the new guys in addition to the fact that, he's retained all those guys. There's so much talent in that space right now. That really has me excited.
What did you think of the move to Omar Manning to the slot?
Well, I know Whipple wants a bigger guy at the slot, but then at the same token, they're still playing. It sounds like at times they'd have like Alante Brown in there too. And I don't know if we can officially kill the Duck R position. I don't know if it's still around or if that's something that's over. We thought we were really clever on the Redcast and called it the Husk R, and that lasted about. Actually, Big Red Wrap-Up one time asked a question to, I think it was Troy Walters was the OC, and they asked him, "Can we call it the Husk R?" And I don't want to say that I'm not taking credit that the Redcast started it, but I think we were one of them. But anyways, they asked that to Troy Walters. He's like, "No, it's not the Husk R, it's the Duck R." I was like, okay, so anyways, I think they want more size out of the slot spot. Last year, they moved Torre into the slot and saw some benefits that came with that. Torre was a freshman running the slot in Montana, and then they moved him outside for his next 2 seasons. And when he came here, he's like, I wanted to get back into the slot because it gave me some more favorable matchups against some safeties and linebackers. So he saw the benefit there. And I think, Manning's he's a lot to handle, and putting him in some favorable positions. If he's going up against an outside linebacker, let's say on a play, I mean, he's going to cause some damage. He already was doing it a year ago, but I can see why they'd want to do that. But there's the next play, they're going to have probably Alante in the slot on the next play, right, and do a jet sweep to him or something. So,
yeah. I agree. I watched a bunch of press conferences over the last couple of days, and Mark Whipple, speaking specifically about the receivers, said that even just one day into spring camp, he saw they got better after reviewing the film from the very first day. Said they're getting better at the top of their routes. They're learning how to see their position through the quarterback's eyes and what the quarterback expects them to do. And as you said, he's got Omar playing inside as well as outside, and that he is blocking quite well on running plays. The rest of you guys, you got anything at all about the wide receivers that kind of have stood out to you over the last week or so? Because they're all on spring break now, so they're not going to care what we say.
All right, I'll go. It's probably not so much, everything that Honke said is true, but it's like some of the names that have not come up that are surprising to me. I think that's a little bit more interesting at the wide receiver area. Like guys like Kamani Grimes and Sean Hardy and
Right.
Latrell Neville. I mean, we haven't heard much about them, if any, right? And I think those were names that I thought that would come up this year. They've been in the program for an entire year. You haven't heard much. And even Wyatt Lever. I mean, Wyatt Lever is a guy that has significant playing time, and you haven't heard anything about him this spring. I mean, good or bad. I mean, I just think that's interesting because I thought headed into the season, I thought we had a lot of talent there, a lot of depth. But, I mean, I'm sure we do, right? But some of these names, I thought that was a little bit interesting.
Well, this is kind of I look at that, Justin, as this is a make or break year for those three guys that they brought.
I mean,
what, 2020?
This is their second year of the program. I mean,
yeah, it's technically it's their third. Didn't they come in 2020 like Kamani Grimes and those guys? Or was it 2021?
It would be their second.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, my bad.
But I think the thing is, and I think to Justin's point, he's right in the sense that it's not, and this isn't a bad thing. And I think both of these position groups, running backs and wide receivers, you're going to deal with the same thing. You can get recruited over. Now, these are good developers. Right. These coaches, they will develop their players. And I mean, that is a trait that both Applewhite and Joseph have. But, and I'm not saying those three are out of it yet. I mean, we're 2 weeks into spring ball. But, yeah, I mean, if you go into next season and you're not playing and suddenly, a Victor Jones or Janarian Bonner, I'm terrible with the names. The guy they just brought in, Bonner. Obviously Palmer, DeColdest is here now. If those guys are playing and you're not, and you've been in the program for a year, then you're getting recruited.
I don't think DeColdest is here yet. I think Mickey mentioned that DeColdest is in Louisiana still. He's not showing up until the summer.
So is he not here then?
He said he'd had some maturity things. He needed to stay another semester in Louisiana, and he's bringing Victor Jones Jr. along really, really slow because there's a lot for him to take in this, and he doesn't want to just blow his confidence out right out of the gate. And speaking of Mickey, he definitely coaches his guys hard. He wants the Wideouts to love the game, and if they only like it, they're not going to work hard enough to be able to play. And says he's going to be on them until they love it and get better each day when they practice. And then he mentioned Alante Brown, the fact that he is a wide receiver at Nebraska who used to be a quarterback before he got here. So he was kind of recruited as an athlete that's going to play wide receiver. So he's still kind of making that transition. Yeah. But without a doubt, not only Mickey mentioned him, but, Frost mentioned him. I think Whipple mentioned him as a dude that's standing out so far in spring. So I look for Alante to do some stuff this year. Yeah, go ahead, Derek.
I think there's a little concern with that, though. And I know me and Justin have had this conversation already, but it seems like every year we're bringing up Alante Brown. Like, it seems like every spring this guy gets brought up. And I'm not trying to crap on the guy or anything, but it does feel like every spring we're talking about this guy and what he's going to do for the team come fall. And then fall comes around, and it's like you see him on kick returns, catching fair catches. And that's about it.
Yeah.
Well, and I agree with you. Derek, but he also didn't have a position coach like Mickey Joseph coaching him. He had, Troy Walters for a year. And then he had the skinny kid that used to work at a freaking drive-through bank window for 2 years. So I think he's got a better shot at making a difference on the team with Mickey pushing him than, somebody like Lubick who – I don't know. He's what?
That may be
145 pounds.
That may be, but you still like be some concern there about him.
I hear you.
I think the concern is fair. The reason I prefaced the whole conversation about those position groups with the coaches before I even start talking about the players is just to illustrate how different things are. You're right. I got tired of watching fair catches with our whoever was returning a kick. But
it doesn't matter if it's a kickoff or a punt return.
Yeah, it didn't matter, right? But now you have Bill Bush in there. There's a major change now.
Waving the hand to catch.
none of this guarantees anything. This is where, I've changed my tone from the first couple of years we did a show where it was like, hey, we made this change and this change is going to just, we're going to go, 15-0 next year because of this change. I like every change they've made. I like every coach we brought in. Bill Bush demonstrated success as a special teams coach here already from 2005 to 2007. I mean, I'm not making up something that I think Bush could be great at it, but it also, until we see it, the realist out there is going to say, hey, until I see it, prove it, right? I just know that I like the changes they've made so that, Alante Brown, I think, is going to be in a better position on special teams. I like the coaching he's going to get. Mark Whipple's a huge difference. The offense is going to look different in a lot of ways. But yeah, I mean, there's talent there. I think from buzz at receiver spot, the two guys that are actually getting some of the most buzz right now are Alante Brown and then Brody Belt. And sometimes with and I don't know because it's spring ball, and spring ball is a lot of times there's always going to be a star walk-on that comes out of it. And that might be Belt there. But I mean, you keep hearing it from so many different coaches. That's interesting to me. And I want to take back something I just said earlier about getting recruited over. I also, in the era of the transfer portal, the Neville and Grimes and Hardy, I mean, I hope these guys fight through it a little bit too. If they were falling down the depth chart, it doesn't mean the first step is just, okay, now it's time to leave. Sometimes it takes a guy an extra year, and then all of a sudden the dude's a stud in year 3 or 4. And that used to be the hallmark of Nebraska too. And so the transfer portal can be nice. You can bring in some good guys, but you also sometimes, look at a school like Iowa right now, they almost never touch the transfer portal, and they almost don't have a lot of guys leaving it either. I mean, that's as much as we don't, sometimes, Iowa's a dirty word here, but I'll tell you what, they must have kind of a culture that guys stick around and they have some consistency. I don't think they bring in some of the very top end talent that gets them over the hump, but they have this level of consistency. And when we're flipping coaches and rosters all over the place, then at the end of the year, we go, well, geez, if we just had a little more consistency, that would have been the thing that would have given us 8 or 9 wins.
But you also have the Michigan States out there that went out and did all the transfer portal and was a great team this year.
Well, great is. I mean, they had a great record. They were down 49-0 at half to Ohio State, and we literally, because of our special teams ineptitude, we don't know which side of the field to kick a punt to, and we should beat them, right? I mean, there's a lot of things. But to your point, they certainly made a huge flip. Nobody was expecting them to have, the record that they had. But I'm curious what they're going to look like a year from now with maybe some expectations under their belt, because they're primed to fall back the other way.
Right. $100 million man right there.
That's fair. I remember when we joined the Big Ten, I used to shit on Michigan State yearly. Me and Justin would have hour-long conversations. He would call me up and tell me how this was going to be Michigan State's best year. He heard this or read that. And I'm like, we hear this every year. Michigan State's never going to be good. Yeah. Next thing you knew, they were making the playoffs, and I was like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah, they got good. They had never beaten us.
I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we were like,
but it took you 4 years to figure that out.
Yeah, it was. Out of all the teams we played in the Big Ten since we've joined, I think the Michigan State games have been the most entertaining out of all of them.
Sure,
absolutely, without a doubt, Michigan State is the team I want to beat more than any in the East, because they kind of got that Midwest sensibilities to them. They were kind of that
run at that too.
Well, but they're in our division, so
I get it. But as far as being in the Big Ten for best games,
so we've kind of, unless Scott's got something to say on the wide receiver side of things, you have anything you want to add to this, Scott?
Not on any players, but just honestly, I friggin' love Mickey Joseph as a coach. Watching his 26-minute presser, dude's just got some swagger to him. He's got just an insane amount of confidence mixed with competence. That if there's any guy who's gonna like really whip our wide receiving room up into shape, like he's the guy to do it. I guess one of the things that did pique my interest was, the kind of speculative shift of Omar Manning going to the inside slot position. Cause I wonder if it's not just simply because he can really put on a block with just his absolute size and physical dominance and intimidation. But I wonder if there's some shiftiness with Omar Manning that we just haven't seen yet. Maybe him being on the outside, we've just seen his breakaway speed, and maybe he's got some shiftiness that we just haven't seen yet. And if Mickey Joseph saw that, then I'm kind of excited to see that.
Yeah.
But no,
that's to see where he lines up on the spring game, right? Is he going to line up in the slot first or outside? Because they're playing him on both spots. I'm sorry, Scott. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'm looking forward to that too. I think that'll be a telltale sign of things to come, just depending on where Omar Manning lines up. If it's Alontae Brown, that's the first guy out there. And yeah, Brody Belt, like the fact that they've mentioned him so many times is like, maybe he has been a hidden gem that we haven't necessarily given its full like palette yet, like let's see what he can provide in like a skill position that Duck R, Husk R. I know me and my dad, ever since we heard on the Redcast talk about it, we've just been calling it the Husk R. So yeah, no, I guess my biggest takeaway is I just love Mickey Joseph and the way that he conducts himself. And he seems like one of those guys that if I were a player and he were my coach, he would have like this presence that not only am I scared of him, but I love him and I want to do everything to impress him. And that's something that I don't think we've had in the wide receiving room ever since Frost took over.
Yeah, it's a family thing there. And you see that with Priscilla, his wife, on Twitter. And I mean, she talks about how, she talks about players that they've had at LSU and previous stops, before he was even at LSU, that, just how close they get. And I think you're right with Manning too, the blocking piece of it. Go back and watch the Northwestern game last year and some of those options that were breaking and everything. And you'd see him 20 yards down the field. And I've never said, I don't think you'd have to be a big receiver to be a good blocker. I mean, you go back to the 90s and the itty bitty committees of, Abdul Muhammad, and those guys were the smallest dudes, but you wouldn't want to mess with any of them. But if all things are equal and you happen to be 6'4" and 225 and you have the want to be a good blocker, watch out. That's pretty good. One guy I do want to mention too, Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, the transfer, and he kind of transferred under the radar because it happened so early. It was in December still. And it kind of before all the other transfer portal stuff happened, but he's the one that came from New Mexico State, and he's got some speed. And I'll be interested to see in spring game, is he doing some stuff on special teams, and what does that look like? I mean, there's a lot of talent. Oliver Martin. I mean, there's some players.
Wait, Oliver Martin? And the talent
still there. Got some speed.
He keeps getting mentioned. Mickey mentioned him in his press conference.
With the best of them.
Yeah, he was on track to win the Blitnikoff through one game last year, and then it didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean he had a disappointing season. I mean, I don't know who had a more disappointing season. Cade Warner's last year or Oliver Martin's last year. I mean that's like it's a toss up between those two. Headed into the season for both those guys had high expectations, and they both fizzled out. I mean.
The difference between Oliver Martin and I'd say Cade Warner is that wasn't it like 4 consecutive incomplete passes thrown to Cade Warner, like all in big moments? Like
it seemed like it.
He had a couple of touchdowns that were dropped, and when you're kind of the possession receiver,
and the captain,
and the captain, there's never there's no receiver position where it's like, hey, this is good to be the slot guy can drop the ball or the deep guy can drop the ball, right? I mean, the idea is catch it, right? And but when you're specifically that possession receiver guy, that was what Warner was supposed to be, and he was just very inconsistent that last year. Martin's supposed to kind of be able to blow the top off a little bit more. We didn't see a whole lot of that.
No.
There was one deep one that he had against Illinois. Again, I don't know how injured he was too after that point. He certainly missed some games after that. And I mean, and for what it's worth, I believe I think he's a walk-on right now still. I think he got a scholarship, but I want to say he's a walk-on right now. And I hope I'm not wrong by saying that.
So on the scholarship distribution chart that I'm looking at right now, it does have him on there.
Does it list him? So, you know, and so right now, I mean, there's really, it's just going through the whole list and just saying there's a lot of bodies there right now. And I wouldn't be the slightest bit shocked at the end of the year if, you know, with the transfer portal, some guys might walk out a little bit. That's what, who's the guy just right before spring ball is?
Will Nixon?
Nixon.
Will Nixon.
Dad's the coach.
Yeah.
You know, I was a little surprised he left exactly when he did, because I figured you kind of do it at the beginning of the semester or you do it after spring, but he did it when he did it. And that's going to happen. That's going to happen in a couple of these groups.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. How about running back? You got anything on that, Honke, that you wanted to talk about tonight?
Just it's another one of those. They have numbers now. They had the same thing a year ago. We were talking about 6 guys the whole offseason. Right now, Anthony Grant is the big junior college transfer that's getting a lot of talk right now, a lot of buzz. Ramir Johnson is almost forgotten about because, you know, there seems like there's been so much change, but I think Ramir is going to be right up there, you know, getting starter and, you know, definitely a lot of reps. Akiz Yant, you watch the videos of him and he looks like he's in great shape right now. That's the biggest thing. He really physically looks like he's put the time in, and that can be a scary thing if they use him well. Now he goes out and gets 4 carries for like 50 yards in the first half against Purdue. And he's, you know, it's only 4 carries, but he made a clear difference. And I remember at halftime tweeting out a poll saying, you know, how many carries should Yant get in the second half? 10, 20, 30, or 40. It's a total joke poll, but the point was feed the guy, right? Yep. And he ended up getting a total of 6 carries for 60 yards. So he only got 2 carries for like 10 more yards the whole second half when he was dominating them on the game.
Clearly running. Yeah.
Clearly running. And for all the run the damn ball guys out there, and I consider myself to be one of them, we're going to throw the ball with Whipple. But my gosh, if you've got something that's working like that, if you can get 10 yards of carry off of a guy, you know, you've got to be able to feed those guys more than that. And, you know, I mean, that's happened for a while. We had Dedrick Mills had 17 carries for like 180 yards against Wisconsin 3 years ago. He was averaging 11 yards a carry, but he only got 17 carries. And I think they said that there was some injury stuff. Well, geez, you know, man, when we play a Jonathan Taylor or one of those guys at Iowa or Wisconsin, it's amazing how some guy will have 30 carries against us. And if something's working, they're not going away from it.
Right, right. I remember one of the things I watched a couple of days ago was running backs coach Ryan Applewhite said that in practice they are setting the line of scrimmage at 35 to 40 yards from the goal line with the idea that they're going to score TDs every time they run a play in practice. Granted, they're touching off, but Brian has told his guys, I don't care if you get touched. You're not down yet because they didn't tackle you. Finish, go score, get used to running across that goal line. And I'm kind of sitting here wondering, where the hell was that mentality the last 4 years? And, you know, he's always saying they got to keep them. He's always saying something. He's keeping them on their toes all the way through practice. He stresses footwork and hitting the hole at the right time because he used to coach offensive tackles and defensive tight ends back in the day at Colorado State, if I remember right. And he learned real quickly based on how those guys work. It's real easy for a running back to either hit the hole too fast or not hit it fast enough and turn a 10-yard, what could be a 10-yard run into a 2-yard loss. So he thinks his time coaching O-line and tight ends has given him a better perspective on how to coach running backs, which with this coaching staff has always had a philosophy of everybody needs to be good at something, more than one thing. And I think Frost kind of realizes that his coaches need to be good at something besides just coaching their position group. And I think that's pretty important. He also said that Ramirez got good feet. He's got great speed, and mentioned what he likes, what he's seen from Raiola for the offensive line up front. So I don't know if any of you guys have anything else to say about the running backs, but go ahead if you've got something.
Well, I'll say this. The only thing I'll say about the running backs is, and this is one thing I didn't like about Held. And I don't mean to put held on a spot or anything, but find a damn running back and stick with him a little bit.
Yeah.
Honke, you kind of alluded to that about, feed the guy. He's hot. Give the hot hand the ball. We haven't had a consistent running back since Zigbo. I mean, that was the last time we really had a truly consistent.
And he wasn't consistent until about 4 games into the 2018 season, right?
He had to find a rhythm.
I mean, I understand that you can't have the same guy run the ball every single time. I understand that, and you're going to have some kind of rotation. But I think you need to keep the rotation somewhat limited, rather than 4, 5, 6 guys running the ball throughout the year.
We hear about like bell cow or what's a bell cow or not. In a perfect world,
right?
If I could have 2,000, let's say it's 2,400 yards rushing that we're going to run for out of the running back spot, I'd love to have 1,200 yards come from your starter, 100 yards a game, right? Okay, there's your starter. And if a backup comes in and your top backup is giving you 800 yards and your third string guy gives you 400 yards, there's 2,400 yards. That's 200 yards a game of rushing offense, specifically from your running back spot. And knowing that you still might run for another 30 or 40 yards a game with some wide receiver, and something that I thought was potentially going to go away the second we hired Whipple. I thought we're going straight to getting the Pickett's out there, those kind of quarterbacks. And, back in December when we didn't get the USC transfer quarterback and some of the other ones, I was like, fine. I'm a mobile quarterback guy to begin with. I'm ecstatic that we went after and got Casey Thompson. And that's what Whipple and Frost want in this offense. Purdy brings some mobility to it. I still like some of the mobility that some others can give you, and Harburg obviously too. I mean, we don't need to run it 25 times a game like Martinez would, but I like the mobility, and that's the thing that I've always said. Geez, if Iowa just had a quarterback that would be more mobile, if Wisconsin had more of the Russell Wilson QBs than some of the guys they've had in the past, man, that would be the thing that would take them over the hump. And that would be the thing that would really scare me about those guys. I've never been scared about their quarterbacks, but it's what they do in the line, and it's what they do. They're fullbacks and they're 2 tight ends, and they just beat you up. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's what we used to always do. That's Wisconsin is running what we used to run in so many ways, except at the QB spot.
I have a question I would like to pose to the cousins and to you, Honke, is that I know that Whipple has a past first kind of mentality, but with Brian Applewhite as our running backs coach, and with the wisdom that I think Mark Whipple brings to the Husker squad, do you think that even though we might have a pass first mentality, that we'll actually have the wisdom and the experience and the choice mentality of, if it isn't broken, don't fix it? In the sense that if we get a run game going and we find somebody who starts to catch a little bit of fire, that we'll actually have the wise choice making decision in our coaching staff, that we can actually have a running back get a rhythm. And they'll be able to recognize it when it's actually happening, and just let it happen. That we don't have to, we got a few explosive running plays, and because of that, we can use that to set up this stupid lucrative passing game again. If it isn't broken, don't fix it. Do you think we'll see a little bit more of that quite possibly this season?
Honke, you go.
Yeah, I certainly hope that if something's working, you want to see it continue to be used. You also would like to see it set something else up. I mean, if you're running double tight, I don't care if you're in shotgun or under center, although it's nice that I think we're going to do a little more under center as well. But if you're doing some double tights and you run the ball on a team, and then you can play action off of it and throw it to a tight end, makes sense. I mean, it's building off of something. Whether it's pass first or run first, I want to be able to run the ball when we have to run it. And watching Pitt last year in the first game, they played at Tennessee. So, you're at an SEC school and everything. And at the end of the game, Pitt had the lead, and they didn't need to score. They just needed to run the clock out. And I don't think they were a great running team, but they were able to get a couple of first downs, run the clock, and basically end the game. And that's what when you can run the ball when you need to, and when you want to run the ball, and the other team even knows you're going to need to. I mean, they had a fullback at times on the field, and that was a dirty word here, fullback. Well, geez, Whipple Whipple has gotten under center. He's had a fullback. He's recruiting a mobile QB right now, or at least dual threat QBs. I mean, hey, if you want to bring a good pass game with all that, I'm here for it. Put some tight ends on the field. I mean, we can get a little old school and Raiola everything that we hear about what they're trying to run with the offensive line. If I've heard anything that's different about how something's being coached, you hear it the most from the O-line with basically kind of a transition from the zone blocking to what the dry blocking, the gap blocking, man blocking that we're doing right now. And that's where, I've heard a number of guys, Bob Sledge, the former Husker, that his son is Sam Sledge, is the recruit on the O-line, saying how, every drill that they do on the O-line is 10 yards. You're going to go 10 yards. This isn't just, hit the guy and put your hand up on him. We're going to drive you 10 yards. We're going to move people. We can be pass first if we're doing all those things. I don't care, because we're gonna be physical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
it's hard to disagree with that.
No. Yeah, I was just basing all this off of my incredibly proficient experience of playing NCAA 2014. And my obviously pristine ability to read the defense whenever I would, just run it up the gut over and over and over again until they pull their linebackers forward a little bit, see if they're doing some zone or if they're doing a blitz, and play it off of that, But yeah, no, that was cheesy of me to bring that up, but whatever. Yeah, I love me some NCAA 14. But
so part of me thinks that, like, Scott Frost, what he really wants to be is a pass first guy, right? Are you guys getting that impression? That's what he truly wants to do, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's why we've seen it. That's why we've seen it for so long and so often, is just the fact that it just seems like once we get something going in the running game, it's like, oh, we got something going. Let's set up for a pass play, but we just haven't necessarily seen it actually come to fruition. And I think if there's anybody who can actually get that done right, with Scott Frost being in that CEO position, it could definitely actually come to life with the running backs coach setting some stuff up, and then the wide receiving coach ready right in the background, like, all right, here's our chess game. Let's think ahead here.
I feel like we're a series of contradictions the last 4 or 5 years as an offense, because I mean, I've gone to coaches clinics. I went to the first 2 that prior to the COVID, and so you get to watch them. I've been doing that going all the way back to Solich, and you get to hear coaches talk and everything. I mean, Frost will tell you every time, I mean, we want to be physical and we want to run the ball. In fact, when he first got here, it was, we want to have Husker power with Oregon speed. That was kind of that was the combination that we were going to put together. But at the end of the day, we always ended up being such a quarterback-centric running offense. And that was what I want to see in talking about Brian Applewhite and his group. And why I say I want to see 2,400 yards out of the running back spot is that spot we need to be I-back you, running back you again. Those running back need to be, and let's say, I'm just throwing names out there, but Ramirez, the 1,200-yard guy, and Anthony Grant, your 800-yard guy, and Jaquez Yant, your 400-yard guy in that scenario. If that's how it played out, look at the different types of guys. I mean, Yant gives you 400 yards, but they're going to be a different 400 than the other two. And they might be the physical, downhill running 3rd and 1. I was pissed off as anything at the Illinois game last year when the fumble that Martinez had on I think it was a 3rd and 1. We had heard all offseason about how we're going to get downhill running. Remember that's the catchphrase, downhill running. So we get into 3rd and 1, and we have a diamond set to the left, 4 wide receivers. They shotgun the ball to him. He misses the open guy, was supposed to be Martin. Apparently he misses the throw or doesn't catch him at the right time. So then he takes off to run, switches the ball from pass to run. And in the process of it, that's when he fumbles and they pick it up, and it's a touchdown return. And I'm sitting there going, that's a whole lot of work to get 1 stupid yard when you've gone out and recruited Stepp and recruited Yant. And we've heard all this garbage about downhill running games. Look, I mean, the run the damn ball guy has a legitimate gripe too. I mean, that's get the damn yard. And there's just a number of times close the game out. What Pitt did last year at Tennessee, I would not call Pitt this big physical team, but they closed the game out, doing it in a physical way at an SEC team. And I think we can be better than that. So let's do it,
Yeah.
The run the ball guys will change their minds when if the passing offense starts working.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to effectively run it. I get it, and I'm not arguing that. That there's going to be scenarios, and you talked about closing out games. You get into your goal line stances. There's times that you're going to have to be able to run it physically. And last year, you started seeing it with Chancellor Burlington, and they're blowing people up and making a hole for it. It didn't matter who had the ball; they had a hole the size of a Mack truck. I mean, really didn't matter. But again, I don't think if we again, you're right about if we need a yard, we need to be able to get that yard. And there's a good gripe there, and it shouldn't have to come from a quarterback. It just shouldn't.
Absolutely, that's the thing,
and that's where I guess my concern always was. So was this a we don't trust our players, or we didn't trust our coaches because we just didn't seem to trust the running back position at all the last 3 or 4 years, especially the last 3 or 4 years.
I think one of the reasons we picked running backs and wide receivers is those two position groups are probably two of the most maddening ones over the last couple of years from a rotation standpoint. Like, who's playing, who's not.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of the year last year at the wide receiver spot, it was like we couldn't get Manning and Betts on the field at the same time. And nothing against a kid like Wyatt Lever as an example, but he was playing the majority of the snaps against Illinois. And again, I love walk-ons. I love all of that. But I'm sitting there going, we were also told all off season how good Manning's going to be and how dynamic Betts is. Why aren't those two on the field? And then to your point, the running back spot, the one running back I didn't mention here, and he's coming off the injury. I don't know how different things would have gone last year if Irvin could have just stayed healthy. I really like Irvin. I thought he did a lot of great things. The injury, I think hurt us for a number of reasons, but maybe he's the guy that could be the next Ozigbo consistent dude. But even Ozigbo, they didn't play him for the first 4 games that year
right.
because they were playing Bell, and it took and then you had to work your way through Bell to get to Ozigbo, and then they finally brought something out of him that he was never got out of him during the Riley era. So he was almost a success story from Held and this offense, but then. Yeah, between Maurice Washington and down the road. Yeah. I mean, we just never had the next guy.
And I don't think the wide receiver coaches have done anything to help their position. And I'm talking about Walters and Lubick here. Because this is one of the most frustrating things I know for Justin and I we've talked about many times is that they always come out and try and talk about how they have 8 rotation guys. We got 8 guys that could be out playing. Yeah. And then we see 3 guys play every game, and only one of them's catching the damn ball.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like, where's these other 5 guys at? How come we can't get any work out of them?
Mm-hmm. We talked with Sipple a couple of years ago, and it would have been the last year. So it would have been the end of the second year of Frost. And he was telling a story about he was talking with Frost in November towards the end of the second season, and Frost was showing him some film, and it was basically of the receivers at that time not being in position, there were just certain things. It was practice film, but it was this didn't get done right. This guy didn't make the right, break here. Some of it was stuff that like to most of our eyes, just unless you were like a 20-year vet coaching, maybe we wouldn't notice some of these things, but Frost is like, this isn't being done to the level I want to see it done. So what happens a month later, Walters is gone. Now, does that mean, so Walters is this horrible, terrible coach, right? Well, he was just in the Super Bowl. And exactly. At the same token that something didn't work before, it doesn't necessarily mean that these are all bad guys. I love, Greg Austin. I think Ryan Held was awesome, but for whatever reason, something didn't work here. And it doesn't mean it won't work for them somewhere else. It doesn't mean zone blocking is bad. It just meant it didn't work here. And all the moves they made, they need to work this time. I mean, I think we all know that there's not like a third revamp that you can go through. This has got to work. And they hired really good people. I mean, these are really good dudes that they brought in. Renowned guys. Whipple just had the Heisman finalist and a Biletnikoff Award winner. And, we talked about what Joseph's done. And these guys, Bill Bush is highly acclaimed. I love the story of Bush and Joseph being in the LSU locker room after the championship with Stogies, basically talking about how cool would this be to do this in Lincoln. They're talking about that in the damn locker room after a national championship game. That's awesome. And that's what these guys bring. And And that's not to disparage anything before. It just, I'm looking ahead. I'm looking straight forward, and I like I like everything they've done. Now it's time to see it on the field, and that's the realist in me will come out and say, yeah, prove it now. Let's see it.
We've heard a lot.
Yeah, go ahead, Derek. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying we've heard a lot of talk. It's time to see it on the field.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.